Bruna was a simple girl from humble origins who lived in a small town in the countryside. She worked hard as a waitress in a local diner to help support her family. Despite the difficulties, Bruna always kept a smile on her face and a heart full of dreams. One day, while serving a table, she bumped into an elegantly dressed customer. As she looked up, Bruna found herself staring at the most beautiful face she had ever seen. It was Raphael, the son of the famous tycoon Donna Teresa, a woman known for her wealth and arrogance. "Excuse me, I didn't see you there," Bruna stammered, feeling her cheeks flush. Raphael smiled gently and replied, "Don't worry, it was an accident. Are you okay?" Bruna nodded, mesmerized by Raphael's deep and expressive eyes. In that moment, something inexplicable happened between them. An instant connection, an attraction that transcended social differences. "My name is Raphael. And you, what's your name?" he asked, his voice as soft as velvet. "Bruna," she responded, feeling her heart race. Little did they know that this casual encounter would change the course of their lives forever, entangling them in a web of love, betrayal, and secrets that would shake the powerful Donna Teresa family. After that first meeting, Bruna and Raphael couldn't get each other off their minds. They crossed paths frequently at the diner where Bruna worked, and each time, a spark of electricity seemed to linger in the air. One day, as Bruna was cleaning the tables, Raphael approached and said with a charming smile, "Hello, Bruna. I know our worlds are quite different, but would you accept to have dinner with me someday?" Bruna was speechless for a moment, her heart racing. She knew that this invitation could mean trouble, as Donna Teresa, Raphael's mother, would never allow her son to be involved with a simple diner girl. I don't know, Raphael. Your mother will never approve of this," she stammered, avoiding his gaze. Raphael moved closer and gently took her hand. "Don't worry about my mother. What matters is what we feel. I want to get to know you better, Bruna. Will you accept?" Bruna looked into Raphael's sincere eyes and knew, in that moment, that she couldn't resist. Even knowing the risks, she nodded her head, a shy smile blossoming on her lips. "Yes, Raphael. I accept." From that day on, Bruna and Raphael met in secret, building a romance that seemed to defy all social barriers. They laughed, talked for hours, and shared their dreams and aspirations, forgetting, for moments, the differences that separated them. But they knew that sooner or later, Donna Teresa would discover their secret, and the fury of the powerful tycoon could change the destiny of them both. After months of secret encounters, Raphael finally convinced Bruna to meet his family. He knew that his mother, Donna Teresa, would never approve of his relationship with a girl from humble origins, but he was determined to fight for their love. On the night of the dinner, Bruna dressed in her best dress and, nervously, accompanied Raphael to the family's grand mansion. As soon as they entered, they were greeted by a maid who guided them to the dining room, where Donna Teresa was waiting. "So this is the famous Bruna," said Teresa, with a fake smile on her lips, her eyes as cold as ice. "I must admit, you are much more beautiful than I imagined." Bruna swallowed hard, trying to keep calm. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Donna Teresa," she replied, her voice trembling. Throughout the dinner, Teresa did not miss the opportunity to humiliate and belittle Bruna, making nasty comments about her humble origins and her job at the diner. "Truly, my son could have chosen someone with a little more class and refinement," scoffed Teresa, as she served a generous portion of food on her plate. Suddenly, without warning, Teresa threw a spoon in Bruna's direction, hitting her squarely on the shoulder. "Oops, sorry dear. I think my hand slipped," she said, with a sarcastic laugh. Bruna felt tears of humiliation and rage well up in her eyes, but she refused to give Teresa the satisfaction. Raphael, visibly embarrassed, rushed to help Bruna, casting a disapproving look at his mother. That dinner would forever mark Bruna's life, leaving her traumatized and determined not to be brought down by Donna Teresa's arrogance and cruelty. Hercules watched the scene with a heavy heart. He was just a humble waiter, but he couldn't stay silent in the face of such injustice. Seeing the poor Bruna being humiliated in that way, he felt a wave of indignation take over him. Approaching the table, Hercules cleared his throat and said firmly, "With all due respect, Donna Teresa, I think your attitude was completely unnecessary and cruel." Teresa stared at him, her eyes flashing with rage. "How dare you, you insignificant person? Who do you think you are to interfere in matters that don't concern you?" Hercules was not intimidated. Looking directly into Teresa's eyes, he replied, "I am Hercules, the waiter. And I saw everything that happened here. This poor girl doesn't deserve to be treated this way, just for loving your son." Raphael kept his gaze lowered, ashamed, while Bruna watched Hercules, awestruck. Then, Hercules made an unexpected move. Stepping closer to Teresa, he lowered his voice and said in a whisper, "I know your secret, Teresa. I know you are not the true heir to this fortune. The money you so boastfully flaunt, it actually belongs to me." Hercules' words echoed through the room, leaving everyone present stunned. Teresa paled, her eyes widening with pure terror. That's a lie. You have no proof," she cried, her control slipping away quickly. Hercules smiled, a shrewd gleam in his eyes. "Believe me, Teresa, I have proof. And if you don't want everyone to know the truth, I suggest you start treating Bruna with a little more respect." Silence fell over the room as Teresa stared at Hercules, her face contorted in an expression of pure hatred. Bruna and Raphael watched, dumbfounded, not knowing what to think. Everything was about to change, and no one was prepared for the storm that was approaching. After the shocking confrontation during the dinner, Donna Teresa was terrified by Hercules' threat. She knew that if this secret were revealed, her entire life and fortune would crumble. Still trembling with rage, Teresa demanded that Hercules accompany her to her private office. "Now you're going to tell me exactly what you know and where you got these absurd accusations," she yelled, slamming her fist on the desk. Hercules remained calm, looking at Teresa with a serious expression. "You know very well what I'm talking about, Teresa. I am the true heir to this fortune, not you." Teresa's eyes widened, her face contorting into a look of panic. "This is impossible. You're just a humble waiter, you have nothing to do with my family." Hercules sighed and began to recount the story he had discovered years ago, through old documents and accounts. "My mother was the youngest sister of your father, Donna Teresa. Before you were born, there was a scandal in the family. My mother became pregnant by a man who was not accepted by your father. To avoid the shame, they forced her to abandon the family and disappear. And when your father died, you took the fortune for yourself, hiding the truth about the rightful heir." Teresa listened, horrified, to Hercules' words. She knew that everything he said was true, but she had never imagined that her well-guarded secret would one day come to light. "So you are the true owner of all this?" she stammered, feeling the ground disappear beneath her feet. Hercules nodded, his gaze unyielding. "Yes, Teresa. This fortune rightfully belongs to me. And now the time has come for you to pay for what you've done." Teresa collapsed into her chair, her face buried in her hands, knowing that her life as she knew it was about to crumble. Donna Teresa could barely believe what she had just heard. All the years of luxury, power, and ostentation were about to come crashing down, for her well-guarded secret had finally been revealed by Hercules, the humble waiter she had always despised. She lifted her head, her face contorted in an expression of pure panic. "This can't be happening. This fortune is mine, I fought for it my entire life," she cried, pounding her fist on the desk. Hercules looked at her, impassive. "You no longer have any right to this fortune, Teresa. It has always belonged to my family." Teresa felt the rage boiling within her. She couldn't accept that everything she had conquered, all her power and status, could be torn from her hands. "No, you can't do this to me. I won't let an insignificant person like you take what is mine," she vociferously, her eyes flashing with hatred. Hercules remained calm, knowing he had to play his game carefully. "You have no choice, Teresa. The evidence is all here," he said, tapping a stack of documents on the desk. "This fortune is rightfully mine. Unless you want me to reveal the truth to everyone." Teresa felt a chill run down her spine. The idea of losing everything, of having her name and reputation tarnished, was a terrifying nightmare. You can't do this to me," she pleaded, her voice trembling. Hercules smiled, a gleam of triumph in his gaze. "Ah, but I can, Teresa. And unless you want to see your world crumble, I suggest you start thinking about how you're going to return what is mine." Teresa knew she was cornered. Her only option was to try to negotiate, even if it meant relinquishing what she had always considered her own. She took a deep breath, swallowing her pride, and said with reluctance, "What do you want, Hercules?" After the shocking confrontation in Donna Teresa's office, Bruna and Raphael were petrified. They had witnessed the revelation of the family's true fortune secret, and they knew that nothing would be the same from that moment on. Raphael, visibly shaken, met with Bruna in a discreet location. "Bruna, we need to get out of here. My mother is out of her mind and I don't know what she's capable of," he said, gripping Bruna's hands urgently. Bruna felt fear take over her. She knew that Donna Teresa was a powerful and influential woman, capable of anything to protect her interests. "But where will we go, Raphael? We have nowhere to run," she exclaimed, her voice trembling. At that moment, Hercules appeared, with a determined air. "I have a plan," he said, approaching the couple. "You two need to get out of here as soon as possible. This fortune now belongs to me, and I won't let Teresa get it back." Raphael looked at Hercules, still confused by the whole situation. "So it's true. You're the legitimate heir to this fortune?" he asked. Hercules nodded, with a somber smile. "Yes, Raphael. And that's why you two need to flee. Your mother won't give up easily, and she'll do anything to try to stop me." Bruna squeezed Raphael's hand, the fear etched on her face. "What are we going to do, Hercules? We can't just abandon everything," she pleaded. Hercules placed his hand on her shoulder, in a gesture of comfort. "I'll take care of everything here. You two need to leave, find a safe place to hide. I'll make sure to keep you informed and protected." Raphael and Bruna looked at each other, knowing they had no other choice. Even with heavy hearts, they nodded, preparing to face the greatest journey of their lives. "All right, Hercules. We'll trust you," said Raphael, embracing Bruna tightly. And so, Bruna and Raphael, with Hercules' help, prepared for a desperate escape, fleeing from the demons of Donna Teresa's past. After the revealing conversation with Hercules, Donna Teresa went out of her mind. She couldn't believe that her best-kept secret had been discovered and that her dominance over the family's fortune was now threatened. Furious, Teresa spent days locked up in her office, devising a plan to reclaim everything she considered rightfully hers. She couldn't accept the idea of losing all her wealth and power to a mere waiter. This can't be allowed, she screamed as she paced back and forth, her nails digging into her palms. I have to put an end to this damned secret once and for all. That's when she had an idea. Summoning her most loyal assistants, Teresa ordered them to hire the best private detectives that money could buy. You have to find Bruna and Raphael. They've fled, but they can't have gone far. Bring me their heads, she vociferously, her eyes shining with uncontrollable thirst for revenge. The detectives, fearful of Teresa's fury, set out immediately in search of them. They scoured the city, interrogating informants and following every lead, determined not to let any trail escape. Meanwhile, Bruna and Raphael were hiding in a small cabin on the outskirts, fearing they would be found at any moment. They knew that Teresa would not rest until she reclaimed what she considered hers. She won't give up, Raphael. She'll hunt us down to the end, lamented Bruna, clinging to her beloved, tears rolling down her face. Raphael hugged her tightly, trying to calm her. We'll be all right, my love. Hercules said he'll protect us. Trust him. But deep down, they both knew that Donna Teresa's fury would be relentless. She would stop at nothing to regain her fortune and her honor. And now, Bruna and Raphael were trapped in a desperate race against time, trying to escape the claws of the powerful magnate. After fleeing desperately from Donna Teresa's mansion, Bruna and Raphael met with Hercules, who was waiting for them in a secret location. You need to hide for a while. My mother won't rest until she finds you, Hercules said, with a serious look. Bruna clutched Raphael's arm, her body trembling with fear. But where will we go, Hercules? We can't keep running forever, she pleaded. Hercules smiled reassuringly and guided them to a small cabin hidden in the middle of the forest. This will be your refuge for now. Here, you'll be safe from Teresa's claws. As they entered the cozy cabin, Bruna and Raphael were impressed. There was food, water, and even some clothes and basic utensils. How did you manage to get all this so quickly? Raphael asked, observing the environment. Hercules shrugged, with a mysterious air. Let's just say I had some contingency plans in case things got out of my control. Now you need to rest and recover. I'll come back later to check on you. Bruna held Hercules' hands, her eyes shining with gratitude. Thank you for everything, Hercules. You're risking so much for us. Hercules squeezed Bruna's hands affectionately. You are important to me. I can't let my Aunt Teresa destroy you. Now, stay here and wait for me. Don't leave this place, all right? After receiving Bruna and Raphael's promise, Hercules bid them farewell and left, leaving the two lovers alone in that improvised hideout. Embracing each other, they tried to find some peace in that moment, knowing that at any moment Donna Teresa could discover their whereabouts. But for now, they had a brief respite before the next storm. Donna Teresa was furious. She couldn't accept that humble waiter, Hercules, had discovered her secret and now threatened to take away everything she had worked so hard to achieve. Locked in her office, she spent hours and hours planning her revenge. Her eyes shone with a manic gleam as she plotted her scheme, determined to do anything to recover what she considered rightfully hers. They won't take this from me. This fortune is mine, and I won't let anyone take it away from me, she grumbled, her nails digging into her skin. Summoning her most loyal lawyers and assistants, Teresa began to hatch her diabolical plan. I want you to mobilize all our resources. Find Bruna and Raphael at all costs. And when you find them, I want you to make them disappear forever," she ordered, her voice cold and determined. Teresa's men looked at each other, visibly frightened by the cruelty of her words. "But, Donna Teresa, that's a crime," one of them dared to say. Teresa glared at him, her face contorting into a mask of fury. "A crime? How dare you question me? This fortune belongs to me, and I won't allow anyone to steal it from me, even if I have to get rid of those damn people." She slammed her fist on the desk, making the men jump in their seats. "Do as I command. And if anyone dares to betray me, you know what will happen to them," she threatened, her voice dripping with venom. The terrified assistants quickly got to work, determined to carry out the orders of their relentless boss. Donna Teresa smiled, watching her plan unfold. She would not rest until she had reclaimed what was hers, even if it meant destroying Bruna and Raphael forever. After weeks of hiding in the small cabin, Bruna and Hercules were finally found by Donna Teresa's henchmen. They were dragged back to the powerful magnate's mansion, where she was waiting for them with a sinister smile. "Look who decided to come back home," she said with disdain, glaring at Bruna and Hercules. Hercules placed himself in front of Bruna, protecting her. "What do you want, Teresa? This fortune is not yours, and you know it," he said firmly. Teresa let out a cold, cruel laugh. "Isn't mine, huh? Well, you'll see that this fortune has always been and always will be mine, you insignificant worm. And neither you nor your little friend are going to stop me from reclaiming it." Bruna clung to Hercules' arm, her body trembling with fear. "Please, Donna Teresa, don't do anything to us. We just want to live in peace," she pleaded, her tears flowing freely. Teresa glared at her with disdain. "Peace? Do you think I'm going to allow you two to be together, happy, while I lose everything I've built? Not a chance, you insolent girl." She then motioned to her men, who approached Bruna and Hercules threateningly. "Take them away from here. And if you two try to come near my fortune again, I swear I won't show any mercy." Bruna and Hercules were dragged away, fighting desperately, but knowing they didn't have the strength to face Teresa's henchmen. As he was being taken, Hercules gave Bruna a determined look. "Don't worry, my love. I'll find a way to get us out of this," he whispered, trying to convey courage. Bruna nodded, clinging to the hope that somehow, they would be able to escape Donna Teresa's terrible threat. While Bruna and Raphael were imprisoned and under Donna Teresa's tight watch, Hercules dedicated himself to investigating the powerful matriarch's obscure past. He knew that to reclaim what was rightfully his, he needed to uncover all the family's secrets. Gathering all the documents and information he had managed to collect over the years, Hercules locked himself in his small office, determined to get to the bottom of this story. "There has to be something more here. Something that can give me a clue about how Teresa acquired this fortune," he murmured, flipping through old records and notes. Days and nights passed, and Hercules delved deeper and deeper into this obsessive investigation. His eyes burned from so much reading, his brain working at a frenetic pace, trying to connect all the dots. Then, amidst a pile of dusty documents, Hercules found something that caught his attention, an old birth certificate with his mother's name. "It can't be," he whispered, feeling his heart racing. Continuing to search, Hercules discovered property records, bank transactions, and even a will that proved his mother, the younger sister of Teresa's father, was the legitimate heir to the fortune. "So that's it. This fortune has always belonged to my family," he exclaimed, his face lighting up with the discovery. Now, with these proofs in hand, Hercules knew he could finally confront Teresa and demand what rightfully belonged to him. But first, he needed to find a way to rescue Bruna and Raphael from the clutches of the dangerous matriarch. Determined, Hercules gathered all the documents and stored them safely. He knew this fight was far from over, but now he had the necessary ammunition to once and for all expose Teresa's terrible secret. After delving deep into his investigation of Dona Teresa's past, Hercules finally found the definitive proof he needed to unmask the powerful magnate. Locked in his office, Hercules carefully analyzed the newly discovered documents, his face expressing a mix of shock and determination. So that's it. Teresa not only usurped my family's fortune, but she also committed a terrible crime, he murmured, his fingers trembling as he leafed through the pages. In those ancient records, Hercules found irrefutable evidence that Teresa had indeed forced her own mother to abandon the family and disappear. Documents that showed how the powerful matriarch had been responsible for removing her aunt from her father's will, ensuring that the fortune remained in her hands. My God, she's worse than I imagined. This woman has no limits. Hercules exclaimed, incredulous at Teresa's cruelty. But the most shocking discovery came next. Buried among the papers, Hercules found photographs and reports that proved Teresa not only had planned her own mother's disappearance, but had also been the mastermind behind her murder. She killed her. Teresa killed her own sister. Hercules said, his voice choked with emotion. This revelation shook Hercules to the core. Now he understood the true nature of that woman, willing to do anything to maintain her empire and her luxury. And he knew he had to act quickly, before Teresa could escape or, even worse, try to get rid of him and Bruno once and for all. With the evidence in hand, Hercules set out determined to confront Teresa, determined to expose all her atrocities and, finally, recover the inheritance that rightfully belonged to him. This would be the greatest and most decisive battle of his life, and he couldn't afford to make a mistake. After uncovering the devastating evidence about Dona Teresa's past, Hercules knew the time had come to confront her. But first, he needed to ensure the safety of Bruna and Raphael, who were still under the powerful matriarch's vigilance. Making discreet contact with Teresa, Hercules summoned her to a meeting, determined to reach an agreement. When Teresa arrived, her face was contorted in a pure expression of hatred. What do you want now, you miserable wretch? She spat the words, glaring at Hercules with disdain. Hercules, keeping his composure, responded. I want to negotiate, Teresa. You know I have proof of what you've done, and I know you don't want the truth to come out. Teresa clenched her fists, her body trembling with contained rage. There's nothing to negotiate. This fortune is mine, and I'm not going to hand it over to you, you worm. Hercules raised his hand, interrupting her. But I think there is. Because if you don't agree to my terms, I'll have no choice but to expose all your crimes. Teresa stared at him, her eyes flashing with hatred. What do you want? She hissed, the words dripping between her clenched teeth. Hercules pulled an envelope from his pocket and extended it to Teresa. I want you to release Bruna and Raphael, and give me half of this fortune. It's the least I can demand after everything you've done. Teresa's eyes widened, her face turning pale. Half? You're crazy. This is absurd. She protested. Hercules maintained an impassive expression. It's this or nothing, Teresa. You know you're not in a position to bargain. The two stared at each other in a battle of wills, each fighting not to lose control of the situation. Finally, after long minutes of tension, Teresa huffed, squeezing her eyes tightly. Fine, you damn bastard. I accept your terms. But this is the last time you extort me, she said, angrily taking the envelope. Hercules nodded, with a satisfied smile. Great. Now, release Bruna and Raphael. And remember, Teresa, I'll be watching you." After extracting the promise from Teresa, Hercules withdrew, knowing that despite the victory, the battle was far from over. After forcing Donna Teresa to release Bruna and Raphael, Hercules prepared for the next step of his plan, bringing the powerful matriarch to justice. With the evidence in hand, Hercules contacted the authorities and reported all of Teresa's crimes, from the murder of her own sister to the usurpation of the family's fortune. When the day of the trial arrived, the courtroom was packed with curious onlookers, eager to witness the downfall of the dreaded Donna Teresa. As she entered, the magnate appeared impassive, her face a mask of arrogance. But Hercules knew that, deep inside, she was terrified at the prospect of finally having her secrets revealed. When called to testify, Teresa responded to the accusations with disdain, categorically denying all the presented evidence. "This is all a lie. This man is trying to steal what is rightfully mine," she shouted, pointing an accusing finger in Hercules' direction. But Hercules was ready. Step by step, he presented the documents, photographs, and testimonies that proved all of Teresa's crimes. "Donna Teresa, you not only usurped the inheritance that belonged to your own sister, but you were also the mastermind behind her murder. Here are the irrefutable proofs," he declared, his voice firm and determined. The courtroom erupted in whispers and outraged murmurs. Some even applauded, satisfied to see the arrogant magnate finally unmasked. Teresa turned pale, her body trembling with pure terror. She knew she could no longer evade the truth. Her perfect world was crumbling before her eyes. The judge, visibly shocked by the revelations, pronounced the sentence. "Donna Teresa, based on the evidence presented, this court finds you guilty of the crimes of murder and fraud. You will be sentenced to 25 years in prison." Teresa let out a cry of despair, her face contorted in a mask of pure fear. "No! This can't be happening. You can't do this to me!" she screamed, as she was taken away by the security guards. Hercules watched the scene, his expression solemn. Finally, after years of struggle, the truth had prevailed. And now, the fortune that should have always been his could finally return to his family's hands. As Teresa was taken to prison, her face twisted in a mask of pure terror, Hercules watched the scene with a mix of relief and satisfaction. Finally, after years of struggle, the truth had prevailed, and the powerful matriarch was being held accountable for her actions. Outside the courthouse, Hercules found Bruna and Raphael, who were waiting anxiously for him. "She was found guilty, wasn't she?" Bruna asked, her eyes shining with hope. Hercules nodded, firmly holding the girl's hands. "Yes, my dear. Teresa will pay for her crimes. And now the fortune she stole from our family will return to its rightful place." Raphael hugged Bruna, his face lit up by a smile of relief. "So, finally, we can start our lives again, can't we? Without the threat of Donna Teresa hanging over us." Hercules smiled and placed his hand on Raphael's shoulder. "Yes, my friend. Now, you two are free to live your love in peace." In the following days, the news of Donna Teresa's conviction spread rapidly, shocking high society. The powerful matriarch, once known for her opulence and influence, was now seen as a criminal, stripped of everything she had amassed through trickery and cruelty. Inside the prison, Teresa found herself alone and helpless, her world of luxury and privilege completely crumbled. She cried and roared with rage, unable to accept that this life of ostentation and power had come to an end. "This can't be happening. This fortune is mine," she screamed, her nails scratching the walls of the solitary cell. But for Teresa, there was no more appeal. Her empire had crumbled, and now she would face the consequences of her actions. All the wealth she had cherished so much was confiscated and returned to Hercules' family, restoring the justice that had been stolen so many years ago. Meanwhile, Bruna and Raphael, free from the threat of Dona Teresa, were able to finally live their love without fear. And Hercules, the humble waiter who had become the rightful heir to the fortune, used his new wealth to rebuild his family's life and help other people in need. A new era had arrived, and justice had finally prevailed over the greed and cruelty of Dona Teresa. After all the drama and turmoil they had faced, Bruna and Hercules finally had a glimpse of a future full of hope and possibilities. With the conviction of Dona Teresa and the recovery of the family's fortune, they felt as if they had been reborn. Meeting at a cafe, the two lovers talked excitedly about their plans for a new beginning. "I can hardly believe it's all over," said Bruna, her face lit up by a radiant smile. "Now we can live in peace, without the threat of Dona Teresa hanging over us." Hercules gently held Bruna's hands, his eyes shining. "Yes, my love. We can finally build the life we deserve, without having to constantly look over our shoulders." Bruna squeezed Hercules' hands, her voice choked with emotion. "And what about you, Hercules? What are you going to do with all this fortune that now belongs to you?" Hercules smiled, his fingers caressing hers softly. "Well, first, I want to use a part of this money to help my family, those who have always been by my side. And then, well, I have plans that will change our lives forever." Bruna looked at him, curious. "What do you mean by that?" Hercules leaned forward, his gaze intense and fixed on hers. "Bruna, I want you to marry me. I want us to build a life together, away from all this drama and this damned fortune." Bruna's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. "Marry you?" she murmured, her heart racing. Hercules nodded, a shy smile on his lips. "Yes, my love. I love you, and now that we are free, I want us to be happy forever." Tears streamed down Bruna's face, but this time they were tears of pure joy. "Yes, Hercules. Yes, I want to marry you," she exclaimed, throwing herself into his arms. The two embraced, emotional, knowing that this was the beginning of a new and wonderful journey. Together, they would build a life far from the shadows of the past, a life filled with love, happiness, and hope. And so Bruna and Hercules, freed from the yoke of Dona Teresa, were finally able to write their own story, ending the tumultuous chapter they had faced. While Bruna and Hercules celebrated their engagement and prepared to build a new life together, they had no idea that there would be one more unexpected twist in their story. One day, they received an unexpected visit at the modest house where they now lived. It was Raphael, Dona Teresa's son, who approached them with a grave expression. "I need to talk to you." "It's about my mother," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. Bruna and Hercules looked at each other, apprehensive. "What happened, Raphael?" Hercules asked, fearing the worst. Raphael sighed deeply before continuing. "My mother, she died in prison." A heavy silence fell over the room as Bruna and Hercules processed the news. "Died? How?" Bruna questioned, the concern evident on her face. Raphael lowered his head, visibly shaken. "They say it was a heart attack. But I think she willed herself to die." Hercules raised an eyebrow, his expression serious. "What do you mean by that, Raphael?" The young man lifted his eyes, looking at the two with determination. "After you reported her, my mother fell into a deep depression. She simply refused to live after losing everything she had built." Bruna felt a pang of compassion, even after all that Dona Teresa had done to them. "So, you think she willed herself to die of grief?" she asked, her voice gentle. Raphael nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Yes. She couldn't bear the idea of spending the rest of her life in prison and losing the wealth she valued so much. For her, death was the only way out." A tense silence hung over them until Hercules spoke up. "I understand. So, what do you expect from us, Raphael?" The young man raised his eyes, pleading. "Please, you too. I know my mother did terrible things, but she was all I had. Could you help me with the funeral arrangements?" Bruna and Hercules looked at each other, torn between compassion and the memory of the suffering caused by Dona Teresa. Finally, Hercules placed his hand on Raphael's shoulder. "Of course, Raphael. We'll help you." And so, even after all the adversities, Bruna and Hercules decided to overcome the hatred and thirst for revenge, choosing forgiveness and compassion. For they knew that sometimes the greatest act of courage is to leave the past behind and move forward, building a better future. In that moment, they understood that the true victory was not in destroying Dona Teresa, but in resisting the temptation of revenge and becoming better than her. And so they embarked on their path to happiness, overcoming all difficulties with determination and love.